Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here Tuesday, June 3rd. Happy Tuesday to you, Jaguars fans. So right now, as y'all know, it is the season of people putting together lists, and we talk about this all the time. It's a little bit of a dead period. You know, you've got OTAs going on, which people should not overreact to. There shouldn't be a ton of reactions from OTAs outside of like talking points from press conferences. Like I do think the weight thing from the Jaguars is pretty interesting. The practice schedule for Travis Hunter, different things like that. But you shouldn't be taking a ton away from practices right now. You look at OTAs wrapping up this week and then mini camp next week, mandatory mini camp, I believe. And then it really is kind of a dead period until training camp gets kicked off. So it is the season of lists, the season of people just kind of prognosticating and projecting forward and thinking about how different moves and different things can work out in the NFL in 2025. So that's where we're at right now. And a ESPN article by Bill Barnwell recently was published, and he's predicting 2025 NFL offseason signings or trades that either break out or flop, right? And so I think he had 15 of these, and Dyami Brown was one of them. And if you don't remember, Dyami Brown signed a 1-year deal with the Jaguars worth $10 million. So not a huge deal for a wide receiver, obviously. And it's only 1 year, which is really interesting. I think that definitely makes things like you don't really know his future at all. He's 26 years old, signed a 1-year deal, $10 million. There's a lot to dive into with that deal. But last year he picked up, what was it? He had 38 targets in the regular season, 30 catches, 308 yards, a touchdown. A lot of his usage was in the screen game and on vertical shots. And then he really did break out in the playoffs. You look at the postseason, and in 3 games, he had 18 targets, 14 receptions, 229 yards, and a touchdown. So he almost matched his season total in terms of yards in the playoffs there. But let's take a look at what Bill Barnwell has to say and kind of break this thing down with Dyami Brown. And again, he's about to be 26 years old. This is his 26-year-old season. He's 25 still, but still a fairly young player, should be entering his prime. Let's take a look at what Bill Barnwell has to say. First, if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. So Barnwell has a pretty lengthy snippet here, and we'll break it down, digest it. A 2021 third-round pick who had fallen down the Washington depth chart with the arrival of Cliff Kingsbury as offensive coordinator last year and the trading away from Jahan Dotson that helped to revitalize Brown's career. He saw regular snaps throughout the season and was an able blocker on the outside, but he didn't start amassing meaningful production until the postseason. After a career-high 308 receiving yards during the regular season, he had 229 more during the postseason, including games with 89 and 98 receiving yards during the Commanders' 2 playoff victories. Did Brown turn into a different player during that playoff run? I'm not so sure, writes Barnwell, that I see that on film. Several of his big plays over that stretch came on blown coverages and scramble drills. He says those yards count, but they're a product of scheme as opposed to Brown getting himself open. He had a 24-yard catch and run on a screen and a 42-yard completion against the Lions' backups who failed to pass off a route concept correctly. Brown did have a 38-yard gain on a seam route running past rookie corner Terrion Arnold out of the slot, but that was the exception for his production during the playoff run. He also fumbled twice, losing a key fumble early on against the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. Over the regular season, writes Barnwell, Brown averaged 1.4 yards per route run, which ranked 68th out of 114 wideouts who ran at least 200 routes last year. While he saw steady work, there were few wideouts who ran less often when they were on the field than them. Who ran routes less often when they were on the field than him. He ran routes on 50.6% of his offensive snaps, the 6th lowest rate for any wideout. On one hand, the limited usage suggests Brown's modest regular season numbers were deflated by a lack of opportunity. On the other, it seems like it's telling that the Commanders didn't prioritize targets for Brown, despite Terry McLaurin being the only imposing option. Barnwell writes, don't be surprised to see more of that in Jacksonville. where the throws will go to Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter. Instead of reaching his January form, Brown is likely to make more of an impact as a blocker and a clear out receiver. All right. So fascinating stuff here, right? I think Bill Barnwell is essentially saying he expects to see what he saw in Washington during the regular season last year for Dyami Brown versus what you saw in the postseason. He did mention the fumbles, and you've got a few guys on the Jaguars offense that have had issues with fumbles. Tank Bigsby, Bashal Tutin comes in as a rookie running back. Everybody gives Travis Etienne flack for the fumble last year, but only one fumble in the last 2 seasons with over 500 touches. I think you can feel pretty good about that. Trevor Lawrence has had some fumbling issues throughout his career. So you add another guy who fumbled twice in the playoffs. I think that there's a fair amount of questions with that, but I think looking at what Dyami Brown was last year, again, somebody who ate on screens, he averaged 7.6 yak per reception. He, in my opinion, was really good in the screen game and really good in the vertical passing game, and also good on some like in breaking routes down the field, digs and things like that. So what do the Jaguars need or want out of this signing? I think would really be kind of critical in assessing what would be successful for Dyami Brown. I don't think that the Jaguars are really looking for, as Barnwell wrote, a wide receiver 2, definitely not a wide receiver 1. I think they want somebody, though, who can be a featured target in a given game if the defense they're playing kind of dictates that, or if the matchups kind of dictate that. A guy who they can funnel some targets to in a given game, who can really be the guy he was in the postseason if they need him to be on a given week. Most weeks they won't need him to because of Brian Thomas Jr., because of Travis Hunter. So I think a successful year for him is just to execute what the Jaguars are asking him to execute in a given week, and when his number is called, to be money. I think you've seen a guy who throughout his career, pretty consistent hands, 6.4% career drop rate, I believe, or 7.8, excuse me. So, I mean, that's more consistent than you saw from like a Christian Kirk or a Calvin Ridley, guys like that. And I'm not saying he's a better player than either of those guys, but when you're just talking about when you throw him an accurate football, is he going to come down with it? Chances are the answer is yes for Dyami Brown. I think that in Liam Cohen's offense, Dyami Brown's skill set makes a lot of sense. The screen game is going to be heavily utilized by Liam Cohen, I believe. And I think that Trevor Lawrence, with his ability to throw the deep ball really well, intermediate to deep is very strong for Trevor Lawrence. I think that will help Dyami Brown out as well on the vertical plane. So I just think executing, and obviously he's going to need to be able to block a little bit because of the screen game, because of getting the ball out quickly for some of these guys. So I think it was an interesting player to kind of highlight for Bill Barnwell. If you're only talking about 15 different guys, does Dyami Brown really need to be on this list? Maybe not. And I will say, from what we've seen so far in practice, he's been pretty good. We'll keep talking about this here. We'll talk about, can he stick in Jacksonville beyond 2025, all that good stuff here. But first, got to remind y'all about Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is one of the best places to make picks during playoff basketball. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps, and you can now play in your state. Millions have already won billions making picks on Underdog. Will you be next? Download the Underdog app and sign up with promo code DuvalDaily to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. That's promo code DuvalDaily. Just download the app and pick higher or lower on players' stats like points, assists, and more. Once your picks feel good, you can play with as little as $1. If you get everything right, you could win up to 1,000 times your money. This week on Underdog, you already know, I'm looking at playoff basketball, selecting SGA to go higher then 33.5 points. Must be 18 plus, 90 plus Alabama, Nebraska, 90 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus Massachusetts and Arizona. Present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. So continuing on about Dyami Brown, he has looked really impressive in practice. I think one thing you have to remember, A, don't overreact to practice in May and June. B, what the media has seen, including myself, at practice so far, there's been 7 practices. We've only been at 3 of them. So in those 3 practices, has Dyami Brown absolutely stood out? Yes, he has. What has practice looked like when we haven't been there? So that's one thing to keep in mind. You also don't have pads. You don't have contact, real contact, meaningful contact. So it's not real football yet. But again, based on what we have seen from him, both at UNC where he was a big-time vertical threat and then at Washington last year. And let's be real. I think one thing that we forget to mention here, like Washington's quarterback situations before 2024, before Jaden Daniels got there, and offense in general, not very conducive to a lot of success. I think it's fair to say that during Dyami Brown's career. So he gets himself in a good offense, and surprise, surprise, he plays pretty well. I would expect him to certainly surpass the 38 regular season targets he got last year in Washington. Washington had a very balanced attack. They ran the ball a lot. I think the Jaguars will run the ball some too, a fair amount, but I think they're going to be pass heavy. Baker Mayfield had a lot of attempts last year. They threw the ball a ton. And part of that is, extending the running game through the short passing game, the quick passing game, screens and things like that. So, but I think Dyami Brown, I would be surprised if he doesn't get at least 50 targets in this passing attack. I think he'll be able to line up out wide, take attention away from Brian Thomas Jr. a little bit and from Travis Hunter. And if he doesn't take attention away from those guys and you're using your third best cover guy against Dyami Brown, he's probably going to win that battle. He's a good receiver. He's a talented guy. If you're talking about playing against zone defenses, again, I think that if you're just running a straight up zone against this offense, any of these guys can eat. Travis Hunter can eat. Brian Thomas Jr. can eat. Dyami Brown can eat. Brenton Strange is going to be a lot more involved than a lot of people have expected, I think. Travis Etienne, Liam Cohen was very complimentary of him and what he can do, getting the ball in his hands quickly, not just as like a running back, but in some of these other ways that maybe you kind of think of as, receivers, the screen game, the jet sweeps, things like that. So I think that having a good year for Dyami is just being reliable and doing what you need to do within the structure of this offense. And his skill set to me suggests that he can do that. And so far what we've seen from a professionalism practice standpoint, everything's pointing in the right direction for that. Now, again, he's only on a 1-year, $10 million deal. So like, what is the future for Dyami? How does he maximize this? It's taking advantage of opportunities here, showing he can get the job done in an even larger role likely than what he had last year, but still as probably the third overall target in the passing game. But a third target in a passing game can be much higher volume than what he had last year. We've seen that. We've seen that quite a bit. So I think that he's going to have his weeks. He's going to have big opportunities, but he will be the third guy. What's interesting about Jacksonville's receiver room specifically is you've got Brian Thomas Jr. who's going into year 2. The Jaguars have 5 years of contract control on him, 4 years left, including 2025. So you're talking about 2024, 25, 26, 27, 28. They wouldn't have to have him on a new contract until the 2029 season. So we've lost some focus here. They wouldn't need to have him on a new contract until 2029. So, and Travis Hunter, he's on a cost-controlled contract until 2030. Point being, if the Jaguars feel like Dyami Brown is playing at such a high level as that third guy in this offense, they could opt to try to just re-sign him during the season or re-sign him as soon as the season ends, and they're able to do that. That could be the path forward because there just won't be a lot of money at the position moving forward. Like, yeah, you obviously have some dead money with Gabe Davis, but outside of that, in between years like 2026 and 2028, there's just not a lot of money on the books at that position. They could say, well, that's great. We will just have an extremely cheap and talented receiver room that features Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter. They could also say, hey, we can afford to pay Dyami a little bit because of that, because of our situation at receiver with these two talented young guys. And we just love having him as that veteran in the room, as that guy who, when his number is called, is going to get the job done for us. Again, that's if he plays the way they're hoping and expecting him to play. It's a prove it deal. And if he, gets featured even more than I'm expecting, which again, I'm expecting probably the 50 to 70 target range for Dyami Brown, just because BTJ is going to be the leading target getter. I think Travis Hunter will definitely be the second leading target. So I'm expecting somewhere 50 to 75 for him, but you never know. With injuries, different things, you can very quickly be forced into a much larger role. I think for him, will he accept just being kind of that like third receiver on a team moving forward throughout his career if he plays the way the Jaguars are hoping he'll play? Or would he want to go test the market and maybe be looked at as like a true starter, a number 2 receiver somewhere? I think he has the potential to be that. I think that he's going into a time in his career, going to be 26 years old later this year, where he should be trying to maximize the dollars that he's getting, right? So it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out with Dyami. So far, it looks really good. Like, he and Trevor have looked, honestly, and you don't want to overreact, but honest takeaway and what I've seen from the 3 practices of the 7 that we've been at as media, you could fairly say it looks like Trevor Lawrence has the most chemistry with Dyami Brown out of all the receivers that the Jaguars have. He obviously played more with Brian Thomas Jr. last year, and I think Brian Thomas Jr. will be his leading target by a wide margin. But, and so it's not surprising also that, Travis Hunter hasn't looked as maybe cohesive with Trevor Lawrence because first time practicing in the NFL. But Dyami Brown, you would not know that he came from a different offense last year based on what you've seen so far. It's looked really clean. But it is just practice. It is non-padded. I think things are headed in the right direction in a big way for the passing game in Jacksonville. We've talked about that a good bit. I think Liam Cohen is brilliant at running an offense. I think Trevor Lawrence is in the best position he's been in his career, and you've got dynamic threats all over the field, including Dyami Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, Bashal Tutin. I think Brenton Strange can fall into that category as well. So I'm excited for this passing attack, excited for Dyami Brown. Obviously, $10 million ain't nothing to scoff at, but he'd probably like to earn a bigger contract, and that could be in Jacksonville. Again, because they just don't have a lot of money on the books at receiver from that 2026 to 2028 time span. Could be elsewhere. Going to be really, really cool to see what he can do here in Jax. Let me know what y'all think about Dyami Brown and the Jaguars passing attack and what his future could be, what you might expect from him in 2025 in the comment section below. And if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.